Hello and welcome to Streams. Today, I'm not joined by Tom, who's usually on this podcast. I'm joined by Warner Shibemba because we have a special episode as we're looking at Daredevil. So thanks for coming, Warner.
Oh yeah, pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
So as we said, we're going to be reviewing today Daredevil Born Again. So this is one of the newest Marvel properties. I don't know if that's what you call it. Marvel basically bought it off Netflix, I think, who owned it, or some other company who owned it, but it was streaming on Netflix. They bought it back because they've got loads and loads of money, and now they've really repackaged it and put it back out into the world. And it's safe to say that Marvel have dropped the ball recently.
Oh, big time.
Massively. Endgame was unbelievably good.
Made 2-point-something billion, so that was where they used to be. Captain America is currently like under 400 million, which is very low. So Marvel are in a very low place right now, quality-wise.
Yeah, awful place. And I think Captain America was actually quite good.
Well, we enjoyed it. We did enjoy it.
And Captain Marvel as well. If you've got time to watch Captain Marvel 2 on Disney+, you should definitely watch it. It's a good time.
It's like an old-school 90s movie where you put it on, you watch it, and you leave it alone. Do you know what I mean? It's not really one of those that stays with you or there's some further thing to take away from it. It's just a film.
Yeah, exactly. And so ultimately, what we're basically trying to say with this is that Captain America and Captain Marvel are the only two good things, really, that Marvel have put out post-Endgame. And there's like a sprinkles of other things that have been okay or half decent. And so this has been one of the most like hotly anticipated things, I think, from the Marvel since they bought the rights back to it, since they repackaged it. Because I think this is quite a loved character.
Yeah.
And I think people quite enjoyed the original series. So basically the way it used to work was Netflix, they did a whole 3 seasons of Daredevil in 2015 to 2018, and then it was cancelled for whatever reason. Marvel bought back the rights, and now in 2025 they've repackaged that and they have kind of brought it back. And so it almost follows on from the old series in some regards, but they have tweaked and changed things slightly.
Yeah.
And so this is a series that you don't necessarily need to watch the first 3 seasons of Daredevil that were on Netflix, now on Disney Plus, to understand what's going on. You can watch this and start here and understand the crack, understand what's happening.
Yeah.
There may be some bits that you will be missing. Obviously, we're not going to do the spoilers at the moment, but I think you can manage quite well. But Warner, tell the people what's the plot, what's it about?
So the general idea is it's following this guy called Matt Murdock, who is a lawyer by day, vigilante by night. And his power is that when he was young, he got into an accident with some chemicals, as is normally the case, is some kind of comic book thing. And he became blind, but then he also got all these insane powers. And it kind of plays off the idea of if you lose one sense, you get really good at the other senses. And so it's that, but it's now superpowers instead. And really, a huge part of the character, actually, in the comics and in the original Netflix show, was that he was a Catholic. In the original Netflix show, you have this kind of dichotomy of how does he balance what he feels as his responsibility of his faith and this call to try and help people. So that's kind of the character as a whole. Born Again is a good title, and I think they work well with that theme. And really, it's about him and his main adversary have kind of been destroyed, and at the beginning of the series they're both at a new place of rebirth, you could say that. And interestingly, the villain is kind of in a better place of rebirth than he is, and it's almost like they're swapping places. And so there's a really good theme of this idea of, are you able to be born again in that sense of redefining yourself? Or are you bound to fall back to things that you used to do and all that type of stuff? So it's a really good show. The format is kind of like a week-to-week thing. It's a little bit weird because they did change a bunch of things before it got released, because the main actors watched the original and said, this is bad, we don't want to be involved in it. So Marvel said, okay, fine, we'll reshoot some things. So there's certain elements that feel like a slightly different tone, but the main gist of it is that it's almost like a week-to-week. Here's the case of the week, because he's a lawyer, so he's assigned a case. He works through the case, whatever the problem is. And then there's like an undertone current of, here's this slightly bigger story behind the scenes, and kind of putting things in place where him and his main adversary are going to end up in a position where they're directly against each other again.
That's a really good summary. I think part of my criticism of this show, and I obviously won't go into the spoilers yet, we'll give you a warning about that in a bit, but is that you can tell that it's been kind of reshot and they've kind of packaged these two kind of things together.
Yeah.
And I think that is a bit of a letdown at times because you can really tell sometimes when something is old and when something is new and they've kind of pieced it together. And it is just a bit classic Marvel in this kind of era of Marvel where they've kind of dropped the ball. And to be fair to them, they haven't just put it out like they have with other stuff. Yeah. They've actually tried to correct it and sort it out.
And what's interesting, so this theme of Born Again, at a meta level, this show is Marvel attempting for them to be born again because this is really the first property we're having where they looked back at their process. They said, we really need to sort out quality. And this was like in the middle of the beginning of that. So that's why it's kind of like almost two shows stitched together. It plays really well to that greater idea when you're watching it, of when you know the background of like, oh, actually, this is about, can we recapture what we were as the $2 billion film people? So, yeah.
I think one of the real standouts of the show is the casting of the characters, because I think the casting is done exceptionally well for Daredevil, Charlie Cox, I think his real name is, and Wilson Fisk as well. I think the guy who plays him, I don't know his name, Vincent something, I think.
Yeah.
He is also really good at being Fisk. They both came over from the Netflix side, so they've not been recast or anything like that. But I think they're exceptional, and they understand the characters. They've obviously done their own homework, their own research, and I think they really know what the character is, what the character's like. And even the guy who plays the Punisher, I think I saw in an interview, he said he read loads and loads and loads of comics to really get a grasp of what is this character like, what's his kind of psyche and everything like that. How does he see the world? And really does a great job of portraying that within these shows.
Yeah.
And I think that from what I understand is that they shot all this stuff. And then, as you said, those guys, those three characters, the guy who plays Punisher, Fisk and Daredevil, all kind of watched it and were like, this isn't right. What I've heard is, and I don't know how true this is, it's just what Rumour Mill says on Twitter, or X, sorry, is that it was more of a comedy. It was basically case by case each week, as you were saying, but it was more kind of comedic and it was more a bit like She-Hulk.
Yeah.
Now, I could not finish She-Hulk because I thought it was really, really rubbish. But it was a bit more kind of like trying to be funny and trying to kind of appeal to a wider audience, whereas the original Netflix show is dark.
No, and it's a much more real take on a street-level person, although they have powers, of course, but really, it's a lot like just a martial artist person fighting in the streets, and that type of, like, that realness of it. The other scenes that you watch in this show, you definitely see, like, oh, this is where the jokes have been placed. And then, like, we've added in the other serious bits to try and balance it out.
The opening scene might seem a bit jarring because it's a big kind of fight scene. And
it's pretty dramatic start.
Yeah, it's kind of a bit. It's a bit mental, and we'll get into the spoilers of kind of more of that. But as I wanted to say that because the first opening 15 minutes is very different to the rest of the show. Really, in terms of it's quite graphic at the start. But then it kind of mellows out a little bit kind of in the middle of the series. It is dark and it's gritty, but it's not like every episode, every 2 minutes, he's like breaking people's arms and he's like, you know, people are getting shot in the head and all this type of crazy stuff. Don't let the name Daredevil put you off because it's got nothing to do with the devil. And don't let the first opening scene put you off. I know that's probably not a good trailer for the thing. Like, don't let the first scene put you off. But I know some people might switch off on that, but don't worry about it at all.
If you like action, you'll be fine with it.
Yes.
If you like lore type of shows or even like CSI type of shows, investigative shows, and you don't mind action, you'll also enjoy it. If you're a little bit squeamish, I don't know if you'll enjoy it just because there is fighting, but it's not super graphic fighting. It's just like punching and things like that. So that's kind of where I'd place it in that realm. There isn't, I wouldn't say it's disturbing or anything, nothing like that.
No.
It's just like, the people fight and their punches through and that type of thing.
So, like, in terms of then the Christian rating perspective, so we do this for every single one of the things that we're reviewing, and we're doing it on a rating of 1 to 5, 5 is like, this is super safe, this is super great, any Christian can watch this. It's the Prince of Egypt, which is the gold standard. So if we're looking at it like that on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being don't ever watch this is not safe for any Christian, 5 being this is super safe, where would you put it and why?
So I'm going to give this a 3. I think most people will be okay with watching this, especially if you're used to watching some, like the average type of action film. I don't even mean like a John Wick type thing. It's not as actiony as that. As we've said, it's kind of a blend of all this kind of law stuff, a bit of levity, and then some more serious, slightly more dark, gritty stuff. I think a 3 is a good point, and especially because of the themes, I think there are actually a lot of themes that are really beneficial to discuss as a believer, with the undertone of that's the character's heritage. But I also think it's really useful to watch a show like this, which is relatively popular, and to actually use it as a way of explaining those themes that it's based on to your colleagues or friends or family, whatever, and talk about your faith through that. Because it's almost like a perfect one-to-one marriage. It's literally called Born Again. I won't go into specifics, but even a theme like forgiveness, which obviously as a Christian, that's a huge thing. And Christianity is one of the key places in religion where forgiveness is such a pillar. Like, that's a great opportunity to be able to say that. So I think it's a 3 is a good place. Then you might need to take a personal discretion. I wouldn't necessarily say let a 10-year-old watch it. Do you know what I mean? I think there's some wisdom. If you're a parent and you're thinking, should my 10-year-old watch it? I'd say no. But if they're like 15, 16 years old, I think you're probably safe to personal discretion, of course.
Yeah, I think I would rate it probably a 3.5.
Oh, 3.5.
Really just because I know for some people the violence would be too much.
Yeah.
Because I think when you look at a classic Marvel show, even though they fight and they kind of use their superpowers against the enemies or whatever else, it's always quite tame. It's always quite... You don't see any kind of gory kind of stuff. Whereas this, like, you see like a guy get shot in the head quite close up. And so, like, there's stuff like that I know some people would be put off by. And so that's why I'd put it as a 3.5.
It's much less cartoonish.
Yes, that's the way.
So the violence doesn't feel cartoony. It does feel like you're watching people fight or you're watching someone shoot a gun. Do you know what I mean? In that sense.
Definitely. And so I agree with you. I think I wouldn't recommend it to a 10-year-old. It's not like your classic Marvel thing where you can kind of show really any kid. It is a bit more dark and gritty. And in terms of the ratings, I think I've seen half the stuff I've seen online says it's an 18 and the other half says it's a 15. So I don't know where it sits. I think if it was up to me, which is not, so
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't really matter. Take this what you will. I think it'd probably be more in the 15 level. So then that kind of gives you an idea of what it might entail. But there isn't any sex scenes. I don't remember there being any swearing. It's something that I would recommend to people, but as well, kind of viewer discretion is advised on that. So what we'll do is we'll dive into the spoiler section now. So we're kind of getting to the nitty-gritty of some of the characters and some of the things that go on in this show. And so if you want to go away and you want to watch it and come back, this is your opportunity to turn off. I'm talking a lot. I'm saying a lot of sentences, waffling to give you all the time that you possibly could need to turn off. So when we get into the plot, I think one of the big things that I think that I heard wasn't in the original one that they brought in was at the start, Foggy dies. Now, if you don't know who Foggy is, Foggy's like his right-hand man, his sidekick. I think they were in college together. They kind of became lawyers together and they kind of work on cases together. And it's almost like his best mate, the one who kind of keeps him a bit grounded to reality. And he's a really great character, and he just gets shot pretty much in like the first scene of the episode. And from what I heard, he was going to be killed off screen in the original. It just kind of fell a bit empty that, Foggy died off screen, but I'm going to be a fun lawyer who's going to make loads of jokes and tussle with this Daredevil stuff. I was really gutted when he died because I was like, I quite like him. But at the same time, I was like, I'm glad you put that in because that helps the rest of the show, this idea of being born again and whatever else kind of really come out because you've got that emotional aspect.
Yeah, I think it's better that they showed it because at least the way that they structured the rest of the season, his internal turmoil throughout all the like weekly crimey stuff, like the lawyer stuff, is meant to be really hard hitting, so that it carries the tension through all those scenarios. And I think the way that they do the beginning of the first episode, the stakes are really there. So whether you've watched the full Netflix stuff beforehand or not, you watch it and you see, okay, I understand that. Like, this guy has firstly lost everything that was close to him, and he has this turmoil of, should I be this vigilante or not? And that theme of, is vigilantism right in this world, and should you take actions into your own hand and that type of thing, is a big overarching theme. And I think you had to see him lose. I think it would be a much worse show. And I think part of the sophistication of the show is that it started off that way. So that even, like, the point that we're at, some of the things you think, oh, do I like the law bits in between? But I think because of it had such a great start and the themes were really clear, that makes it really strong, and that the little crumbs that you might get in between episodes and things like that, it makes that way better. If that hadn't happened, I think I may have dropped off early. Do you know what I mean? It might have been like a She-Hulk thing where I was kind of like, it's not really for me. This is for someone else, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's one of the kind of things I really picked up on was within the whole kind of series, not just this one, but also the previous ones, is kind of Matt Murdock and this struggle of kind of this vigilante and wanting justice. Because part of the thing he does with his lawyer stuff is that he's really concerned with right justice. And so he often takes cases that don't necessarily benefit him.
Yeah.
We see this in the start of this series where he takes this guy who turns out to be another vigilante, White Tiger, but when he's just kind of in his civilian clothes or whatever, he's going home, he's doing something, and he goes down to this subway platform and he sees these two corrupt police officers kind of talking to this other guy, whatever. When he tries to stop a fight, one of the police officers goes onto the tracks and gets killed.
Yeah.
And he gets the blame for it, obviously, because these police officers are corrupt and all this type of stuff. And Matt Murdock takes on the case because he's concerned with justice. He's like, no, this isn't right. You didn't do it. These cops are setting you up to take the fall for them. So, you know, I mean, I'm gonna do it for free. I'm gonna do free work, and he does that a lot throughout all these series. He's really concerned with making sure justice is being done, even though it doesn't personally benefit him. He's not getting loads of money from it. He's not kind of, you know, working at the top lawyer firm and all this type of stuff. I think that's kind of follows through into his vigilante stuff because he wants to do right. But I think sometimes the lines get blurred between right justice and doing what's right in terms of the vigilante stuff, and then just kind of personal vengeance and anger and stuff like that. And I think sometimes that kind of comes through. Is in his lawyer stuff, it always seems really nice and happy, but then his vigilante stuff, the lines start to get really blurred, and then he kind of does this back and forth sometimes where he's really trying to figure out, how do I balance this idea of, like, I need to be a vigilante and I need to help people who can't help themselves, but at the same time not let my anger, not let my personal vengeance and whatever else overtake that, and that become the main thing of why I'm doing what I'm doing. You know what I mean? Yeah,
that tension really is throughout the whole show of, can I live out as the highest ideal of myself? And one of his big issues is that although he loves saving people as a vigilante, he also has an inclination where he just likes to fight and he likes to beat people up. And there are moments in the show which are really nice and I think really tastefully done, where you see snippets of, like, there's another nature in him that he's trying to suppress, and he's not trying to engage with that nature, but he knows that the action of being the vigilante actually helped a lot of people. And one of the things I really like is this theme of what's the price of inaction. So especially with some of the other vigilantes, it looks at, some of them are docile, or some of them are kind of trying to still do it undercover. And the way that the series is, Fisk is mayor. Obviously, we can say that in the spot, isn't it? Yeah. So Fisk is mayor at the beginning. He's very much like, I'm anti-vigilante. That's almost like his whole docket. Anti-vigilante, bringing back justice through the criminal courts and the police and all that. But he's obviously super corrupt, criminal, etc. And New York as a city know this. And the vigilantes know this, and the people know this, all this type of stuff. Matt has to wrestle with, is my inaction worth the inconvenience of what I might have to do? And that theme of, I know that I could do more, but is the price of me doing more worth it for the inconvenience? Which, again, the beginning of the show, seeing Foggy die, as sad as it is, really makes that question legitimate, because he has to think. In the show, he obviously meets other people, he builds other friendships, relationships. So he then gains things that could be lost again. And so that question of, is it worth putting yourself in a place of risk for other people? Like, how valuable is that when the system around you maybe isn't the greatest at taking care of them? And I think, especially as a believer, that's one of the things I think is a really pertinent question of, if you believe in Jesus, which most likely if you listen to this, you probably do, I don't want to assume, but you believe in something which is of the utmost importance to everyone else anywhere, and especially to those who don't believe. And what's the price of inaction in not sharing that? Do you know what I mean? And you kind of face this thing of fear of man or fear of yourself and all these type of things. But is the thing you carry, or the capability that you have to save someone else, is that stronger than the inaction? Do you know what I mean? I think that theme carries through some of the Catholic thing inherent in the character. And you see that. And then you also see it in Fisk, where he's really trying to be reformed as much as he can. He's trying to do the straight and narrow thing. He tries to tidy up as much of the criminal stuff in the clean way. But his nature at this point in the show is he's pretty certified as the criminal of criminals. He's the kingpin, you know what I mean? So he's fighting it in the opposite direction of, can I stay in this place of where I feel like I've redeemed myself? Or is my inaction in my criminal place messing things up in my plans? And really, the story is about them meeting in the middle. One is saying, actually, no, I need to step back into this to protect as many people as possible. And Fisk's agenda is, no, I need to step back into this criminality so that I can control the city and make it whatever vision I think it's supposed to be.
I think as well, you really see what you were saying earlier about, you got Daredevil, who is trying to kind of perform up to this kind of ideal version of kind of what he's supposed to be as this kind of lawyer, as this one vigilante saving people, but then struggling with the other side of things, which is kind of that anger. And there's even like an arrogance, I think, as well, because he's blind, but obviously he can see just as well as anybody else, really. And
maybe better than
probably better than everybody else. And I think there are moments where he has interactions with certain people who are his enemies or whatever.
Some of them don't know of his abilities, but they're becoming very suspicious that you are playing a facade of being blind.
Yes. So he's not just like this poor, helpless blind man who needs help everywhere. Like he can see, I think they're getting on, and he plays on that, and I think there is a real arrogance to that, and it's almost like he's being dragged down by this other side into this kind of really dark and gritty world, and it really made me think of kind of the way that we operate as Christians in terms of kind of life in the spirit and sin and all that
Romans 8, Romans 8.
Yeah, exactly. Romans 7 and 8. I know some people listen to this will have certain viewpoints on Romans 7 as a present tense thing, but I see it as a past tense thing, that this idea of kind of this real struggle with sin is, I can't do anything that's good, as Paul says. But then once we come to know Christ, there's no condemnation. We live now in the Spirit, and we live in a completely different reality. And it's almost like two sides of the coin or something like that. One side is kind of what we used to be, the BC life before Christ. And then now we're in this new life that we have in Christ. Even though we're in this place, we can always still be dragged down into that other place through our own thoughts and our own ways of living and all this type of stuff. We can always fall back into the way that we used to live, because that's our default. That's what we used to live for so many years. It's almost like that's our natural inclination, and part of the Christian life and becoming like Christ is being renewed, so then you have a new default. Your default isn't sin and all that terribleness anymore.
Preach it.
It's now to live in Christ and live by the Spirit and everything that unpacks. But ultimately, we're all in that process of trying to work that out, and we're all at different stages in that process. And so the thing is that even though we are now in Christ, have this new standing and this new nature and all this amazing stuff, we can still get dragged back into our old selves. And you really see that in this show. Kind of, he's doing really amazing stuff where he's representing these people that they can't represent themselves. They don't have the money, the resource. Basically, everything is against these guys.
Yeah.
And so he's really working hard in order to be this ideal version of himself, to fight for justice. But then he's also being dragged by all this other stuff that's going on, this vigilante stuff, and his arrogance and kind of the anger and the vengeance and everything like that. And I thought it was a really good kind of picture of how we operate and we live.
Yeah. And one of the things I really liked is this sense of what is the hope of being able to achieve that goal. And Christianity says that hope is achieved in Jesus. So you're not trying to achieve it yourself. But I think part of why I gave it a 3 is that knowing this cultural thing that's there. Do you know what I mean? It's a TV property, but actually the themes are so sophisticated that you can have a really legitimate conversation with people about, do you think people can change? Can people change? Is there a hope that you can try and live a different way, or even not be bound by whatever things you see internally as these are my negative sides? One of the things in the Netflix version of the show was that he would often go to the church building to go and talk to the priest there if he was struggling. And he'd kind of have this thing of the priest and Foggy would be like the angel on one side, and then his inclination to fight people would be like the devil on the other. And there'd be parts where he's acting as the vigilante and still has to choose in that moment, am I going to do the just right thing and sometimes the merciful thing in this scenario, or am I going to like take out my frustration on this criminal who, you know what I mean, that there's a just punishment there, but am I just going to go all the way and just destroy this person? Especially nowadays where there's so many different polarizations on so many different topics, that theme of like, actually, there is a hope for redemption. That's what we believe as Christians. And one of the great lines on this show, and I have to say the writing on this show is really good. I really like it. It says, forgiveness is the highest form of love. So this theme of, are you willing to forgive? What is the price of forgiveness? What can you achieve if you do give forgiveness, and the value of that? I think it's a really key point of the show. And part of the challenge of the show is whether people can forgive others, forgive themselves, and what can happen if you don't, and what can happen if you do. Do you know what I mean?
And so, before we finish, any last final thoughts?
I just think it's a good watch. And I think especially if you might have like family that's kind of slightly older. I mean, older than like 14. You know what I mean? So if you have like teenagers, or like your family's slightly older, or friendship groups, and this is the type of thing that you like to watch or whatever, I think it's a really fantastic opportunity to be able to talk about more than just a show. Like, there's certainly the entertainment factor there, but I think especially the way that this is structured, formatted, and just the way things are in society, I think this is a really great opportunity to, much like Paul did when he said, you have an unknown God, let me tell you what the unknown God is. This is that type of opportunity where you can actually share the truth of Jesus through this and through some of the themes. There are a lot of parallels it has between very controversial political figures in our world today. I'm not going to say any particular names, but I'm sure you can imagine. And that type of kind of intense support one way or another. So I think it's very topical. Clearly, they decided to make it a commentary on that aspect of American society for sure. There are a lot of positive discussions that are there to be had through this. And it's good. It's a good watch.
Many people have beef with Marvel. They've dropped off Marvel. And so I think a lot of people would see this, go, Marvel, not interested. But it is a good watch. Yeah. But that's it for today. Thanks, Warner, for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
If you do end up watching this, please let us know what you thought. And if we missed anything, it's always great to hear your feedback. And as well as that, if there's anything that you are interested in watching or you have watched and you want to hear our review and our perspective on it, then you can simply send us an email at info@gnba.net. That's info@gnba.net. But join us in the next one. I'll see you there.